Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin. Our guest for today is Mrs. Adele Shaw. She is in Spicewood, Texas. Adele uses a science-based approach in training and care and seeks to find a holistic balance between environment, lifestyle, and physical and mental soundness. She utilizes choice and control, positive reinforcement, behavioral science, the humane hierarchy, LIMA, and more. Her goal is to make this information accessible and achievable for the average horse owner. She is a Certified Horse Behaviour Consultant with the IAABC and an endorsed trainer with the World Bitless Association. So this lady's as evil as they come. I'm ready if you are. Ding, ding, huh?
Sounds good.
All right. So I was telling you in our pre-interview, I think we probably agree on like 85% of everything. And I do want to touch on some of that. And then we want to get into some of the other little areas where we don't. If things get too bad, my safe word is Dr. Cook. So just throw that
oh my goodness, Dr. Cook. Yeah, no, that's I'll use the same safe word. How about that?
Sounds good. Now my goal in the interview is to get to a point where I can say that out loud.
No. Let's not do that. Let's stay on the same page and talk friendly.
We like to start everything out with the lightning round questions, just to keep it loose and kind of break the ice. So what is your favorite way to relax?
Oh man, I'm a binge reader and Netflix watcher. So I will just turn on a series and I wait until the series is like that season is completely done. So Netflix tends to release everything all at once now, but they used to back in the day, like one time a week or once a week, they would release the episodes. And I waited till they were all done so I could just plop in front of that TV and just watch for a whole day straight. And I only do that every once in a while, but that just helps me de-stress so much. So that's one of them. And then reading, I do a lot of reading.
What kind of shows do you watch? Is it rom-com stuff or like?
No, I like shows like How I Met Your Mother, and also Supernatural is another one of my favorites. I've watched that at least 4 times through. So, and that's a lot of seasons. So yeah, that gives you an idea of how much binge watching I'll do. And I tend to watch while I'm doing other stuff. So, doing the dishes or folding laundry. So I can just do kind of basic maintenance stuff around the house that's pretty mindless, and then or kind of listen mostly to the TV in the background. So
morning or evening?
As far as favorite time of day?
You're a morning person, night person?
Oh, no, not a morning person. Not by any stretch of the imagination. It is really hard for me to get out of bed before like 8 or 9. So I prefer evening. My favorite time of the day is like sunset. And then after that, and man, that's so much better. I love training during that time of the day when the sun's setting and everything's quiet. So yeah.
Bay or sorrel?
Ooh, I'm going to have to go with, if we can put a lot of chrome on them, I'm going to go with bay.
Okay. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
No, not at all.
That's one of those questions that just amazes me. There are people with very strong feelings about that, and I just don't get it. But anyway.
You either love it or you hate it kind of thing, I guess.
Do you have a particular pet peeve?
Oh, I'd have to think on that some more, but I think one of my big ones is like listening to people eat, and especially like slurping soup and stuff, or even dogs licking from bowls, like drinking water. That really bothers me. And I don't know why, especially because I have a bunch of dogs. So you'd think I'd get over it by now, but I don't.
But a horse eating a carrot 2 feet away from your ear doesn't bother you at all.
No problem. Horses, and even when I make soaked mash and stuff, I have no problems. I can listen to that all day long, but it's people and dogs. Like I can't listen to them eat. I don't know why that is.
Favorite beverage?
Probably tea. Unsweet tea is one of my favorites. And then would probably be Coca-Cola after that. So Coke.
Tell us something unexpected about you.
Oh, unexpected. I don't know. Some of my past jobs might be a little bit unexpected. I did professional makeup artistry. So I did like bridal makeup for a long time. And then I also nannied for a long time as well, before I got into professional horse training.
If you could choose any superpower, what superpower would you choose?
Maybe healing. I think healing would be a really good one. Just being able to like heal people through touch and stuff. Although I imagine that would be a really hard one to have and be a lot of burnout that might be associated with that one, but that would be a good superpower.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely not a good time to pick Russia.
I was going to say, especially with my kids, I have a 7-year-old son and man, he's always getting hurt. That would be a really useful skill to have. I can't tell you how many times we've been to like the urgent care and stuff from something silly he's done.
Welcome to raising boys. Yeah.
Yep.
Thoughts or feelings?
Thoughts or feelings? What do you mean?
Do you consider yourself more a cerebral, analytical thinker or an empathic, go by your gut, feel your way through it?
I would say it's been more, it's funny because initially, like when I was younger, definitely more like thought, like you need to process things. Everything needs to be very calculated, done, this, in the head. And I've started to come to really trust my intuition and my instinct and my feelings a whole lot more. So I'm trying to get more to that balanced state where it's a little bit of both. But I tend to probably run more towards the analytical, like thinking through things and having a game plan and all of that, more than just going off of feeling.
Right before we throw the game plan out the window and do what the horse. Are you decisive or indecisive?
I tend towards indecisive. I tend to want to run my opinions and thoughts and things and plans by a bunch of people. So particularly my husband, I always run things by him first. I don't always do what he says or what he recommends, but it's just like, I just want to talk it out. I just want to flesh it out and like hear a bunch of different thoughts before I make a decision.
That's the fastest answer from an indecisive person I've ever gotten. All right. Usually I have a long pause I have to edit off.
I've gotten good at it. I've trained myself to be more decisive. When you're running your own business and you have to work on the fly with like doing podcasts and stuff like that, you have to force yourself to just like go with it, make those decisions.
Sometimes you just have to pull the trigger.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite piece of tack or horse related tool?
Probably. I don't go anywhere without my clicker. So we could probably call that the main tool. And after that, it's going to be like a target. I can't tell you how many things I can do like training wise with a target. And we can go into explaining what that is more in a little bit, but yeah, it's probably clicker first. And then after that's going to be the target.
Okay. Do you have like a specific, like, hey, nobody touched the black clicker right there? That's like the...
Yes. I get these packets. They'll come in like 6 or 12 clickers and they're very specific type of clicker that I like. And they come in all different colors, but I always snag the white and the black ones. And those are mine and nobody else can touch them. Everybody else can have the blue, the yellow, the green, like you guys can have all that, but it's the white or the black that are mine.
Do you have a favorite book or movie? I guess we kind of already talked about that a little bit. What about a guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure.
You're a young mom, so you've got to have like a bottle of wine in the closet hidden somewhere, a pack of Oreos or something like that, right? I mean, come on.
It would probably be like reading topics. I really enjoy like historical fiction, but usually there's a bunch of romance involved with that. So that'd probably be my guilty. Like I just binge read stuff like that.
What is your favorite dinosaur?
Oh my gosh. Don't even like my son knows every dinosaur that there ever was. And he could tell you when they lived, and I don't know any of them. We'll go with the Velociraptor. I don't know why, just because, I know why, because of what was that Jurassic Park movie that came out not too long ago where he's doing the clicker with the Velociraptors, which he does wrong, by the way, which annoys me, but I just love that they put that in there. I was like, yes, clicker with the Velociraptors.
Yeah. When you do understand behavioral conditioning, you are doomed to be frustrated for the rest of your life watching movies and listening to the terms used wrong. Yeah.
Yep.
Have you ever had a UFO encounter?
Nope. No, my father-in-law would say he has, but not me. Nope.
All right. I'm supposed to award points and prizes. To be honest, I don't even remember what the last points I awarded was. We'll say 211 points. Good job. All that good.
Perfect. Awesome. I'm a winner.
Yep. I can offer you an awkward silence or a compliment. Either one you pick for winning the game. So
we'll do awkward silence.
Was that satisfying or what?
That was very awkward. Very satisfying.
Okay, that's the only pause we won't edit out.
Okay.
All right. Okay, I already told you my safe word joke, so we'll get that out of the way. Why don't you give us just the 30,000 foot view of what you basically do and are trying to encompass in your business and your various avenues, of reaching people and so forth?
Yeah. My focus is on behavioral rehabilitation. So I really enjoy working with, and people get a kick out of this non-horse people get a kick out of this when I talk to them about it. And I work with the horses that have a history of aggression or dangerous behaviors towards people, horses that will come through the fence to get you kind of thing. And I work with a lot of clients who have tried it, all the stuff, been there, done that kind of thing, and nothing seems to be working. And so I will come in and I either do just a consultation, and we'll talk to them about some modifications we can make in the horse's environment and in their diets, things like that. And sometimes we go into a training aspect, or I actually come in and do the training myself and make all the modifications. So my goal is really to help people understand their horses better and what their horses' basic needs are and how to meet them so that their horses can be happy and comfortable, so that they can then do the things that we want them to do, whether that's trail riding or competitions or just being a companion. It doesn't really matter. The main goal here is helping people understand horses and horses being able to live in their environment, in our man-made environment, in the best way possible, in the healthiest way possible. So that takes me in a lot of different directions, whether it's just a one-time consultation and things are kind of quote fixed, or sometimes, the clients don't want to make those changes, so we don't end up continuing. Or sometimes that ends up being long-term training programs. Like I've worked with many horses for multiple years, and we continue from a very basic, like this horse, I can't even walk into the pasture with this horse, to, let's progress to, let's start under saddle and let's do all this other training. So it really depends. My scope is a little bit broad, because what I do is there's not a lot of trainers and behaviorists out there. So I tend to fill in a lot of gaps in a lot of different places. So I really meet the client's needs and the individual horse's needs where they're at and work with them from there. So, and I also have a different side of what I do, which is teaching people how to utilize positive reinforcement and clicker training in their everyday handling and in being able to do things like trail riding and riding, in competitions and just basic handling skills. And I can do that virtually or in person. So I have kind of two different sides of what I do on a daily basis.
Okay. And I will mention here in the show notes, we will have links to your website, and Perfect. I'm not exactly sure how to link to your podcast, but it's the Willing Equine. So anybody,
it's on my website, it'll work.
Yeah. And then your YouTube channel, all that stuff. So
yeah.
What turned you into one of these wacky positive reinforcement people? Was there like a catalyst event, or have you just kind of naturally tended that way? How did you start with horses, or maybe it was dogs and then you transitioned to horses, or where did that all happen for you?
Yeah. It's always been horses for me. I've been riding and been around horses since I was 8, and I've always been interested in working with horses that were kind of the quote rejects of I would go to summer camp and I would literally ask for the horse that nobody else wanted to work with. And I don't know what it is about me, personality, genetics, whatever, that makes me prone or drawn to horses like that. But I've always had a heart for them and wanted to be there for them. My approach to working with those kinds of horses was quite different at the time. I was still very much immersed in a horse culture that believed in heavy dominance, and you needed to really bully the horse to get them to behave well. So the more let's say you had an aggressive horse that you were working with, or a horse that was really resistant, or people would call it a bully, whatever. The solution was always to be more heavy-handed and to push harder, kick harder, scare them more. So at the time, obviously my approach was quite different. I had a bunch of stuff happen in my life as far as I started, I had kids and got married, and there was some financial stuff, and there was just all kinds of stuff that happened that caused me to have to temporarily step away from really intense horse stuff. So I was doing it more recreational for a little while, which didn't last very long, but that gave me some space to start exploring dog training. I had always been interested in dogs as well. I did competitive agility for a long time and obedience. And I worked at a boarding kennel and got certified for dog training. And that's what introduced me to clicker training and positive reinforcement, was working with dogs. And then when I started coming back into the horse world more in a more dedicated, intense way, I got involved with a mare. Her name was Tiger, and she was kind of the catalyst for everything where I am now. And she unfortunately passed away 2 years. It was in 2020. So she came from a really rough background, which at the time I didn't know and didn't understand very well. And I'll backtrack really quickly. When I was with horses, when I competed with them and everything, I did hunter jumper, I did dressage. I was riding 7 days a week, many, many hours a day. Like, I was really intense as far as the competition training, taking lessons. I took private lessons pretty much every day. Like, it was really intense horse stuff. And then when I took that kind of recreational break, I still had horses, but I just wasn't showing and competing and training as often. So when I got back into horses, it was still from my recreational. That's where I kind of started from, was with that recreational stuff. And I bought a mare, and she came from that really rough background, and I started to implement a lot of the stuff I had been learning kind of in that in-between stage. I had learned a lot about natural horsemanship. I had learned a lot about classical dressage. I had learned a lot about keeping horses in a healthier way and meeting their species appropriate needs, and just on and on. So I had been learning a lot throughout this process. But then I got this mare, and even though I was implementing all of this, my improved knowledge on how to use negative reinforcement and my improved knowledge on horse behavior and meeting their needs, it still wasn't enough for her, because she had so much trauma and baggage with pressure, any kind of pressure. Like, you would just step close to her and she would go into full on red flag mode, like above threshold. She was terrified because of how people had treated her. So it really required me to try something completely new. So I started exploring different ways of interacting with horses, because I couldn't apply any level of pressure with her at all without her going through the roof and it being extremely dangerous. And she would buck and rear and bolt, and it would take 2 hours to catch her out of the pasture. It was intense. It was a lot. And she really pushed me to start exploring more and learning more about horse behavior and about what trauma looks like in horses, and just a bunch of different stuff. And we could go into all of this. So I was actually on social media and started seeing some clicker training videos. I'm like, what is this? Oh my gosh, you can't use clicker training with horses. You can't feed horses. That makes them dangerous. And I was a huge skeptic, and I pushed back on it. And then my friends really encouraged me. They said, you don't really have anything else to lose, because at this point she was so dangerous to be around, but I couldn't sell her because she'd end up nowhere good. My other option was putting her down or just letting her sit in the pasture, which wasn't safe either, because if something were to happen, I wouldn't have been able to properly take care of her. And so they were like, you have nothing else to lose. Why don't you just try it? I'm like, okay, fine, I'll try it. So I started exploring it. I just read a couple of books and played around with it a little bit. I made a lot of mistakes early on, which actually some stuff started to get better, but some stuff actually got a whole lot worse because I didn't realize what I was doing. Again, all those mistakes. So I ended up putting it away. I was like, clicker training is just not for horses. You can't do it. It's not safe. It made her into a, angry food monster. So now she's not only just dangerous under saddle, she's now also pushy after the food, really grabby, biting, like all of the the horror stories that you hear about. So I set it aside for probably about 6 months. And then I had another friend who was like, I think you should try it again, but this time with professional help and coaching. And I was like, what? I need coaching. And so I took it up again, this time with a stronger support system and stronger education. And that was it. I was hooked from then on out, and our relationship completely transformed to the point where I was able to take her out on trail rides, no problem, alone. I could ride completely tackless. We could do all kinds of, just the relationship, everything about her changed, and everything about me changed as far as interacting with horses. And it started to roll over into the rest of my life too. I stopped looking at I started looking at the people around me and all of the living beings around me, whether it was dogs, kids, human adults, horses, parrots, it doesn't matter. I started looking at the why of their behavior. Why are they doing things the way they are? How can we help them? How can we, manage the environment and look at what's reinforcing that behavior, and just looking at interacting with the world and the people around me and the living beings around me with that LIMA mentality. So least intrusive, minimally aversive approach. So while I'm going to say this, I'm not anti-negative reinforcement. I'm not anti-pressure. It's just what I do. I work with horses that have experienced just so much poor handling and training and serious amounts of trauma at the hands of different horse people, well-meaning horse people a lot of times, that I need to come in with a totally different approach. I need to rebuild their confidence and their trust and show them that people are good. And yeah, so that's kind of what started that. And then from there, the Willing Equine started, and I started working with so many different types of horses and growing my experience and my knowledge, and then starting to be able to teach other people. I didn't want to just keep it limited to my geographical location. I wanted to expand it, especially with all the technology we have. Why keep it local? And it's been amazing. It's been an amazing journey, and it's been a wild one, and it's definitely not been easy. There's been some severe ups and downs and some existential crisis moments where I'm like, what am I even doing? But yeah, so that's how I got here.
Okay. See, 85%. We're right on the same page. I cry every day. Every single day. It's rough. If people have, they would think all you do is play with horses all day. How hard or frustrating can that be?
Oh my goodness.
Horses are owned by people, and that complicates the world. Okay. So we don't have a whole lot of time left, so I'm going to kind of hit the high points here.
Sounds good.
Is food necessary for positive reinforcement training?
No, it's whatever the horse finds is reinforcing. So the learner decides what's reinforcing for them. A lot of horses enjoy scratches, so petting on them, scratching, but many horses don't. I think far more people think their horses like scratches than horses actually like scratches. And a lot of this 5%. Can be, that a lot of, sometimes that's physical. So sometimes a horse comes to me and they don't like scratches, and then I start healing, their body starts healing and stuff, and then they start to like scratches. So it really depends on the horse. Technically, there's other stuff you can use. So for example, I have a mare that she was really barging through my pasture gate. She was just trying to come through it because she wanted to get out. So I was able to actually teach her to back away from the gate by opening the gate to let her out. That was the positive reinforcer, is letting her go out at the gate. So no click, no food. As soon as she backed up, I opened the gate and she just went out. I think people use a lot more positive reinforcement in their day-to-day base, handling and interacting with their horses than they realize, but it's unintentional. So I'm not talking about, you're riding around and then you pat your horse on the neck and that was positive reinforcement. I'm talking more about when you're walking down the barn alleyway or whatever, and you have your food buckets, and then your horses are pawing at the gates, and then you dump the food in, you accidentally positively reinforce that behavior. So there's a lot of that goes on that we can look at. So kind of natural day-to-day things that we do that we could be more strategic with to reinforce certain desirable behaviors.
Yeah, I think people need to always remember that all these terms, they just belong within an organizational structure. One of my favorite clips, I laugh at it every single time I watch it. I won't name the clinician, but he's world famous and real big on the horse trainers are evil bastards and you're all abusing horses. And he's standing there working with a colt, talking about how bad punishment is while punishing the horse.
Oh, yeah.
But he doesn't know that that's what he's doing because he doesn't understand the organizational structure, but he's technically punishing the horse while condescendingly talking to the rest of us about punishing horses.
Yes.
I laugh every single time I watch that.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you can laugh about that. I would be sitting there just going like, oh my gosh. It's like a sad laugh.
Like he's not doing anything hugely it's something that would turn your stomach, but it's technically, he is adding something to make a behavior less likely to reoccur.
Yes.
And that is punishment. So
yes. Do
you have a favorite treat? Like, are you using alfalfa pellets, or you have a special horse biscuit or carrots, or is there a go-to?
Yeah. So I tell people I don't use treats because treats have that word itself has a bit of a negative connotation when it comes to horses in particular. Oh, because they're thinking like you're dragging out, and I'm not ragging on Mrs. Pastures, but they're thinking that kind of treat. Like you're bringing out I'm feeding my horses pounds and pounds of molassesy, sugary treats every day. That is not happening. I feed hay. So I can either feed loose hay. So just a bit of, in my area, it's mostly Bermuda coastal hay, or some Timothy would be great. So you can just have like a bag on your side that has a bunch of loose hay, and it's just part of their forage intake every day. Or so that tends to be a little bit cumbersome to carry around. If I don't have to do that, I will use like a Timothy pellet, or an alfalfa pellet. But that is 99.99% of what I use. And then the other, well, actually, I should say it's more like 90% because I try as much as I can to cut up celery and use that because it's really low calorie, and that helps because I have a bunch of metabolic horses. So I'm always trying to cut back on their calories. But yeah, so at the end of the day, we're just using forage. We're just using part of their daily intake of forage every day. And I might use something like some carrots or some low NSC type, something from Tractor Supply or something. But that's like 5 of them I might use for like an extra special, like, yeah, you gave me, that big trot that I've been working really hard to get. So it's like an extra special treat, but It's not their daily. Yeah, it's a jackpot. It's not their normal daily food.
So I guess this is where you brought up negative connotations and stuff. I'll tell you a little bit about my background with this stuff.
Yeah.
So I went to Louisiana Tech University. I was originally in engineering, but switched to pre-veterinary medicine and was training horses, working for a cutting horse trainer all the way through. And actually originally started at Louisiana Tech at the racehorse stables there. So my first riding job, believe it or not, was as a racehorse jockey. And then I'm getting into some of the behavioral classes, and I don't remember exactly who brought me the video. And this is like when the internet was an infant, you had AOL and, it takes 5 minutes for a picture. So anyway, it was a news story from a lady in Florida who had been a SeaWorld trainer, I think, and who was revolutionary. I don't know who this lady is. Maybe you know her. She may be one of the big gurus. And so there's this interview of her with her husband and a sorrel mare, and they've got the treat pouches, and they're sending it through this obstacle course, and it plays fetch and all of this. And at this point, I had probably started 200 horses. I had a clue about what was going on. And this mare's body language was just screaming F you at these two people the whole time. She had pinned ears. During the interview, she actually throws a kick at the husband. I mean, she was as disrespectful and pig-eyed as you could get. And that put a negative connotation on positive reinforcement for me for a long time, because I'm sitting there going, this lady's the guru of this, and she is clueless. She is in imminent danger right now and has no idea what's going on. But one of my rules is that you should not judge something based upon how it is being misused. And I would consider, I don't know if that lady is a guru or whatever. I know that at 25 years ago, during that particular interview, she didn't have a clue about what the hell she was doing, or couldn't read horses. Maybe she could train a dolphin to bounce a ball on its nose, but she had no idea the danger she was in with this horse. So she was in mugging stage, So this is where I guess my problem with positive reinforcement comes in, is that a lot of the times when you see it beginning to be applied, it's applied by people that do not yet have an understanding of how to read horses or the skills of timing well developed. And you wind up with a horse, again, when it's misused, that can become flat out dangerous and pushy and biting and that sort of a thing. So what would you say about that? I mean, obviously your job is to educate people and prevent that from happening, but do you come across that as well? And how do you go about sort of, hey, how about we try this instead?
There's a lot of different factors that go into this. One is that it is still relatively new, and we are still figuring out some of the nuances of how to effectively use positive reinforcement with horses, but not just effectively, but ethically. So we need to look at it from an ethics basics too. And that even with dog training. So if we go back and look at dog training ethics wise, back in the day when we first started using positive reinforcement, especially in like military dog training, whatever, and this is still happening, it was very common to deprive dogs of food so they were really hungry and so that they would work harder. So it's evolved. It's evolved over time. We've been implementing more.
Do you know B.F. Skinner's original protocol?
Yeah, there's a lot of there was a lot of stuff that was not great back in the day.
The animal to 80% of its original weight.
Yeah.
And then you started from there. So they were hungry. And I have to say, full disclosure here, falconry is one of my hobbies. And that's actually something we have to do. You weigh the bird every single day, and there is a flying weight. And if you get them too fat above that, you lose all motivation and may lose your bird. So that is still at play in some worlds, I guess. It's not that we're starving them. I mean, you're looking for the range. You're not trying purposefully to take them as low as you can take them. But, that's
even in horses, we have to, like the other day, it was actually just yesterday, I was in a certain situation with a horse and we had a certain amount of time to do something and we were actually reaching satiation level. So the horse was starting to tap out both mentally and physically, just like they wanted to rest. They were not interested in food too much more. And so, there are different aspects to training with positive reinforcement that you don't run into with other ways of training. But then there on the other ways of training, there are those aspects. So it's give and take in some areas. So ethics has changed a lot in the animal training world, in the behavior world over even just very recently. I spend a lot of time listening to webinars, going to conferences, just continuing education in this area, learning more about consent and control. Now, animals don't understand consent the same way we do. So I'm using that word loosely for a human learning, but choice and control, cooperative care, just all this, we're really just we're just really starting to explore the ethics in animal training. And so when you look back at older training videos with positive reinforcement, regardless of the species, there's a lot of stuff in those videos and the way they did things that we don't necessarily do anymore because we've realized that it's stressful for the animal, it's not healthy, it's not safe, on and on. On top of that, you've got your individual species. So somebody who doesn't understand the individual species needs, horses, for example, require, they graze 18 hours a day, plus or minus, and they require, their seeking system is activated like all the time, basically. They're always looking for food. So some of the things that we do with horses that you don't necessarily do with some other species are, I always have other forage available. So there's always grass or hay available so that they're not frustrated and constantly feeling like they have to do what I'm asking them to do to get the food. This is a whole nother hour-long conversation on that and how that ends up working. I will say in short, yes, the horse still participates in the training, still actively engages, still wants to engage. It's all in the strategy and how you do it. So a lot of our older training, though, with horses, we were implementing a lot of what we were doing with dogs which is a different species, with horses, and not realizing that these horses that we were working with are often on highly restricted diets. So they were getting 2 flakes of hay in the morning, 2 flakes at night, kind of thing. And then we would walk into the arena with a pouch full of food and we're like, go do all these things, even though you're in winter is coming mode, like you're in starvation mode, because your body is not designed to have food restricted like this. So they're frustrated. They're frustrated all the time because they're not able to meet their needs on a daily basis with grazing and getting all of the forage that they need. So now we're crossing into extinction and negative punishment and just all this frustration around food. So this is what I talk about a lot on my podcast and different platforms. Is my intent with how I train and what I do is to not put my learners, my horses, in that state of mind. I don't want them to feel like that they don't have other access to forage. And when they come to me, I want them to be very have really a good way of putting this is have really good feelings around food. So they need to be really comfortable and feel safe that they will always have adequate forage available. So when I have a horse that has been in that deprived state, it does take me some time to help them feel really relaxed around food again. So there's a whole nother side to this where we have to look at, and this is where LIMA and the humane hierarchy comes in and all of that, is we have to look at how the horse is living and how they're eating on a daily basis when we are starting our training. This isn't much different from, you're going to start a horse under saddle. Well, you need to look at how they're feeling physically. If you're getting on a horse that has kissing spine to start them under saddle, you're going to have a really rough time and it's going to be terrible for the horse. So the same idea here, we're just looking at more internal stuff. So like the stomach, how does the stomach feel? How do they feel about food? Have they been really deprived? All of that. So we can't I'll just sum it up. Basically, we've made a lot of progress in this area, and my job and what I do is helping people get started on the right foot. And this is the same as with any other kind of training. We see trainers all the time, whether they're training with negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement or any type of training method or anything like that. If they go into it as a novice trainer without any coaching, with minimal education, and they're just playing around with it, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. They're also probably going to miss all the horse's signs of frustration and confusion and fear. That's a really common one for people to miss, is a bunch of subtle fear signs. So it's no different with positive reinforcement. If it's not even novice horse trainers, it's trainers, whether you're super experienced or completely novice, horse people in general, if they don't have a proper education in how to implement this way of training and they don't have any coaching, then they're bound to make a lot of mistakes and create a lot of frustration in their horse. And so what's going to help that is to have more and more trainers, like is happening now, have more readily accessible information and really thorough education programs, and that's my goal. That's why I do a lot of online stuff and have my courses, is to create that. This is kind of a path to follow. Now, I believe in very flexible paths, not just a strict step 1, step 2, but I do provide like that framework. Like, how do you help your horse feel safe and comfortable and at ease so that we can train not only effectively, but ethically. And so that's really my whole approach.
So you would agree that basic horsemanship skills like timing and ability to read the horse are equally important in your world as they would be in ours. This is not a workaround of doing that work and learning those lessons. They are equally need to be incorporated into the positive reinforcement world. And
100%. And on top of that, I will say, because I still do, there are clients I work with where I do more negative reinforcement with them. This has made me 100 times better trainer because my timing has to be impeccable. And I spend hours and hours practicing timing, and that's like way too small of an amount of time, but I spend so much time practicing my mechanics, what we call mechanics. So basically what my body language is doing, like how am I standing? What am I doing? Does this look consistent? Does my vocal cue sound consistent? Like how can the horse accurately read what I'm asking them? And I practice this with other humans. So like we'll get into clinics and I have another human and we're practicing on each other and we're practicing timing and we're practicing shaping games. And we spend so much time getting to that point where we are very consistent, very predictable, and clear with our training so that our horses can have the easiest time possible figuring out the puzzle, right? Because they're just they're in the dark. They don't know what we want. This is all foreign to them. So that's a huge part of this.
See, that's one of the things that I try to talk about with the bit stuff is the same thing, that your rein cues need to be consistent. The horse needs to see you coming. The horse needs to be comfortable with you taking the slack out of the rein and engaging the bit. And there's a lot of people that are riding around, they just use their hands too quickly and the horse flinches every single time they're picking the rein up. And that will incorrectly be labeled a bit problem, when in reality it's the short between the reins and the saddle that's the issue there. And if you can just get the people to slow their hands down and be consistent, and the horse can see them coming, then the horse just relaxes and melts right into it, and all of our problems go away. All of the red lights turn green. Your mother-in-law likes you. It just makes the world a better place. So
yeah, and on top of that, just having a consistent idea of what you're looking for. I find so many times, regardless of how you're training, one day the rider's wanting one thing and the next day they want something else, or they, it's just inconsistency in general is the greatest enemy here when it comes to training.
So there's no way I'm going to get to all of my questions here, but
well, my kids are being quiet, so I think we could run a little over. So don't worry too much.
Well, one of the things that you brought up, it's a term I haven't heard, and that is the humane hierarchy. Would you explain that for us? Yeah.
So the humane hierarchy is, I'm actually going to pull it up real quick so I can read through it, so I don't butcher it, because that's something that I do sometimes. But basically it was created by, or started by, Dr. Susan Friedman, who's fantastic. You should definitely check her out. I've learned a lot from her and taken her courses. So what it is it's a kind of a checklist like that you can run through as a trainer or as a behavioral consultant. And what it does is it talks you through when you have a behavior problem, when you have something you see that you don't necessarily want to see more of, how can we help this learner? Again, dog, horse, cat, doesn't matter. How can we modify this behavior in a way that is humane and is effective and keeps the learner's just well-being in mind? And so the first step is wellness. So we're looking at nutrition and physical. So does my horse feel well? Can they move and do the things that I'm asking them to do? This is when we get vet checks. This is when we get second vet checks, maybe even third, because I can't tell you how many times I've had to run a horse through multiple different vets to find the problem. So just one vet visit is not usually enough. And then we're also looking at nutrition. Are their basic needs in nutrition being met? And I'm a huge advocate for hay analysis and mineral balancing according to that. I can't tell you how many times I've helped a horse's, behavior problem, in quotation marks, just through the nutrition and just by making sure they feel okay. I don't even have to touch the training. Most of what I do when I do behavioral consult is not actually training at all. It's looking at the nutrition, looking at the horse's wellness. And then we look at.
So how do you specifically, is that like a hair test or
the hay analysis is, when you take, sorry, I said the word slurred, hay analysis. So I take the hay in and I send it into a lab basically, and they figure out what the nutritional value of the hay and everything is. Like I just had one back and I figured out that my iron is really high in the hay that I just got. So I've got to bump up my copper and zinc to balance it all out. And that has a dramatic impact on my horse's overall health. Especially if they spend years and years with a nutrient deficient forage and it's not being made up in some other way, then you're going to have a lot of fallout from that physically from your horse, which then leads to mental stuff too. And then that part of that is also looking at the next kind of step is looking at environment. So how is the environment set up? Like, does my horse have enough? Do they have companions? Do they have their shelter? Do they have enough room to move around? Are you setting them up? Like one example is I have a lot of times where clients contact me because their horses are being, pushy and aggressive around feeding time. Well, the way their environment is set up during feeding time, they have to walk through the middle of the pasture with a bunch of buckets of food on their hands while the horses all swarm around to get to their feeding pens. And I'm like, it would be such an easy fix if we just changed how this was set up. And usually they're movable panels and all that. We could just change that, and suddenly all the behavior problems are fixed. So that's kind of the next step. And that would be a really easy way without having to get very intrusive or aversive with fixing the problem. And then the next stop is looking at fixing the behavior or improving the behavior through positive reinforcement. And then after that, we have differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors, extinction, negative reinforcement, negative punishment, and positive punishment. There's some arguments about those bottom three, like the bottom three steps and tiers, and you guys can look it up yourself, where they should all be categorized. But it still, to me, is a really good reference for where we should start when analyzing a horse's behavior and trying to improve upon it to help everybody be safe and comfortable and happy. And so I use the humane hierarchy in a lot of what I do. I look at everything through that lens.
So let me ask you this, and I'm going to go ahead and define it. You and I will be familiar, but maybe the rest of the world isn't. Negative punishment is the removal of something in order to make a behavior less likely to reoccur. So the example I tend to use with that is you have a teenager who stays out too late, you take their phone away, you ground them, you remove something from their world that they value, and that's the punishment for staying out too late or whatever. I have never found a practical application of that with a horse that I felt like they could actually understand. To me, it's just too abstract a concept. And I think even within people, I mean, negative punishment is the same thing as jail. We take away their freedom, and now here you're being punished. And just because it is such an abstract, the timing is so far removed, there's really no way to make the timing of it work out. I've never found that to be an actually effective or practical tool. So you mentioned it in there. Can you give me an example of where it would be applicable and actually helpful?
Yeah. So there are a couple of different ways. It's really actually can be quite easy to accidentally utilize when you're working with positive reinforcement, just like positive punishment. So the application of an aversive to decrease the likelihood of a behavior from reoccurring. So that's positive punishment has a greater opportunity to show up on accident when you're working with negative reinforcement. So they kind of can be a little bit sisters, negative reinforcement and positive punishment, and then positive reinforcement and negative punishment. They can kind of accidentally, if you're not sure what you're doing or if the setup is not right or whatever, it can happen. So a good example of negative punishment with training with positive reinforcement would be, you've been we could say that withholding food. So if your horse isn't doing the thing you're looking for, they're pawing or whatever, and you take away the food. So you had the food strapped to you and they're pawing and you just don't give it to them, or you even walk away. That could be a negative punishment. So you are punishing that behavior of pawing by removing the opportunity for that reinforcement. You're taking it away.
You could actually say your example with the horse and the gate earlier could be looked at through that lens as well. It wants out the gate, and you're not allowing it out of the gate until it does.
Yeah, so we're putting it through, that would be like you're putting them through extinction. So they have this behavior, especially if it's been reinforced in the past. Let's say they stand at the gate and they're pushing at the gate and pushing at it, and eventually somebody always let them out. So they got positively reinforced for pushing at the gate, and somebody will let them out. So let's say we want to fix that behavior. If I just stand there and wait for them to stop pushing at the gate, and then I open it and let them out, I'm putting them through an extinction cycle. So this goes back to the ethics too, because extinction, while effective, is super frustrating for our learners. I mean, they just had to go, especially if that behavior is really well reinforced. Let's say you spent, this horse has been for the last 2 years pushing on this gate and people let him out. And then all of a sudden you show up and you're like, nope, we're not going to do that anymore. Do you know how long that behavior would continue to go and go and go and go until that horse was like, this isn't working anymore? But in the meantime, and this is what happens actually a lot of times with novice clicker trainers and positive reinforcement trainers, and happened to me in the early stages, and this is what creates that dangerous behavior, is we accidentally use a lot of that because we're like, our criteria is way too high, what we're looking for. We're not setting them up for success. We're just sitting there waiting. We're waiting for the thing that we want, and then we eventually click. In the meantime, the horse is going, oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated right now. And so what they start to do is escalate their behavior. So going back to that gate example, you have a horse pushing at the gate. Well, now they're starting to get frustrated because you've just been standing there staring at them and they're thinking you're an idiot at this point. And they're going to start pawing at it. Okay, that's not working. They're going to start reaching their head out and maybe even trying to snap at you. Like they're trying to do stuff. They're escalating their behavior that used to work to see if they can get you to now do it with these stronger, bigger behaviors. So this is where what I do, and I've worked very, very hard to get to this point and teaching people how to do this, is to avoid those situations altogether. So what I'll come in and say, okay, we don't want this horse to push at the gate anymore. There's a lot of things we could do in that situation. We could feed them down the fence so they're not standing at the gate. So then when they first walk up to the gate and they're standing quietly, we open the gate right away. And so we're setting up everything. We're getting the antecedent arrangement. We're getting it all set up so the horse can be successful. And then from there, I might start looking for, okay, they just tweaked their muscles and started to shift their weight back right there at that microsecond. I'm going to let that gate open right then. And I'm going to start to shape this behavior without all of that extinction, without all of that frustration, until a couple sessions to a week or two down the road, they're backing up 4 steps away from that gate right as I'm arriving. And then I open the gate. But we start off with little tiny criteria that they can easily achieve. And then we build from there. And this is a huge part of improving the ethics around training with positive reinforcement, is working hard to set our learners up for success. And we could call this, it's the idea behind it is errorless learning. So the horse is, in theory, not really having any errors. This isn't to mean that they won't happen, but that's the goal. The goal is errorless learning. So how can we set this horse up to get the right answer right away so there's no frustration, and then build from there? And part of that's our criteria, part of that's trainer education, part of that's antecedent arrangement, part of that is also going back to the humane hierarchy. It's the wellness and nutrition and all that. Like there's so many different factors that go into this to help that horse out. And I've completely forgotten your original question.
Well,
negative punishment.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, like the way that you just described that is exactly the same way I would describe negative reinforcement. And I guess we kind of have, I don't really want this to be set up as a positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement.
No, it's okay.
But I mean, I would again, we're looking for the smallest try, the slightest little thing, reward the horse often. Most people are waiting for too big of a sign, and they miss the 4 little things that they could have rewarded. And so it's really all, and setup. I talk an awful lot about setup. I think that's one of the biggest aspects of good horsemanship, whether you're positive reinforcement or whatever, is just having things set up where it's likely to be successful rather than likely frustrating and a pain in the neck. So I'm not sure that I did ask you about the negative reinforcement, but that was a tangent off of the humane hierarchy. So you talked about wellness and environment, and did you finish that?
Well, we started talking about negative punishment and different examples for that. Is that what? I don't know.
Went down a list in positive punishment, negative punishment was right before it.
So on the humane hierarchy, they have differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors. And then the next stop is extinction, negative reinforcement, and negative punishment. And then the last one is positive punishment. So positive punishment should be avoided at all costs. Like that's just like the end of the road, last ditch survival mode. I tend to say that if you're going to use like positive punishment should never be part of your training protocol. It's a, oh shit, like things just, things went through the roof. I'm defending myself. So it's temporary. It's in self-defense. It's to protect myself. And then we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to avoid using it in the future. That's my personal approach. Is I don't ever use positive punishment as an intentional part of the training program. That's not to say it has never shown up. It does. I'm human, but I try and avoid it at all costs. And that's part of the humane hierarchy, is avoiding it at all costs because of the level of fallout that can come with positive punishment.
So I would say I do have a difference of opinion with you there.
That's fine.
And again, sort of like the clinician I was talking about earlier, what he was doing with the colt was taking a flag on a stick and tapping him because the horse wasn't moving. I think it comes down to connotation. When people hear positive punishment, their mind goes to like a baseball bat with some nails through it and beating on a horse or something like that. And positive punishment doesn't even have to involve touch at all. I could go, hey, and when they do the wrong thing and I scare them a little bit, and that's the aversive, I added the me jumping and making a loud noise to discourage the behavior. An electric fence, which I think is one of the most humane, best fences for horses, works through the principle of doc, it hurts when I move my arm like this. Positive punishment. So like, I'm not squeamish about using it. I would use positive punishment in front of a crowd of 3,000 people while working with a horse. I don't think 2,998 of them would know that that's what I just did if I didn't describe to them that that's what you just saw me do. So I don't really find, again, to me, it's a horsemanship issue. Can I take positive punishment and take it too far and go off the rails and cause myself all kinds of problems that I'm about to fix with this horse? 100% I can do that. Can I use it in a smart way and be kind of slick and use it effectively on a day-to-day basis without problem behavior showing up and all kind of, 100% I can do that. I think it comes down to the skill of the person.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to jump a little further down into that rabbit hole, but you can holler Dr. Cook now if you want to, or whatever.
No, that's fine. I don't have a problem talking about this. I think positive punishment can be used in a ethical and I'm tentative to use that word. It can be used in a well-timed way, in a way that is not permanently harmful, long-term, whatever. But it's not my go-to, and it's way, way, way far down that list. I don't go into my training going, I'm going to use positive punishment today. That's basically what I meant by that. And, again, just like we talked about, positive reinforcement is defined, or the reinforcer is defined by the learner. So is positive punishment. So what is punishing to the learner is they define it, not us. I have a really good example of this that I love to share. So I have a mare and she does not like her head being touched. She does not like being rubbed on her forehead. It is just, she hates it. And I had a student that was working with her and they were teaching her to line up at the mounting block. And every time she'd line up at the mounting block, she would click and feed. Well, I was watching and everything was going great. And then I stepped away for a little bit to do something else. And then I came back, asked how things were going. And she said, well, it fell apart after you left. I said, oh, okay, interesting. Show me what was happening. So she showed me again. So the horse lines up at the mounting block. She clicks and feeds. And after she feeds, though, she rubs the horse's head. And guess what started to happen? The mare stopped lining up at the mounting block because the being rubbed on the head was punishing. So the behavior decreased, the behavior that we were looking for, but we unintentionally punished it. So that was a form of positive punishment. And so it doesn't, like you said, it's not always like this obvious, like you smack them in the face or, hit them or whatever. Sometimes it's as mild as like you pet them. Like if they don't like that, then it's punishing. And so this is a great conversation in relationship to your earlier question of like, do you always have to use food for positive reinforcement? No, but your learner gets to decide what is reinforcing, not you. So you could say, oh, I pat my horse as a reinforcer. Well, what if your horse doesn't like being pat? Like they get to decide.
There's plenty. My personal horse is not one of those that wants to come to the fence and get loved on. I mean, I can probably scratch on him, but you can't. You know what I mean? Like he and I have that relationship, but it's not okay for just anybody to do that. So I guess I am more comfortable jumping into the realm of positive punishment. Again, I don't think anybody watching would have their stomach turned, or they're not going to call the Humane Society. One of the aspects I wanted to jump into there. And I guess I have a little, you kind of paused a second and go, here I am rambling, trying to find the right words where I don't offend you, but I kind of get my point across.
It's okay. You're probably not going to. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different people with different opinions.
I guess it's the use of the word ethical. Is specifically what it is. So okay. To my mind, when you've described this whole humane hierarchy, again, it is basically an organizational structure put forth by a person who probably is an expert. I don't know them at all. And as you said, the name, it did sound a little familiar. So I'm kind of now, when we get done, I'm going to go look it up and see if it's who I'm thinking of. But this is basically their opinion of what a humane hierarchy is. It could be argued that that's not correct. So it's an umbrella to work under, but it isn't it isn't like 2 + 2 = 4. It's not an absolute concept. It's just
no.
So that's where we can have differing opinions, and it doesn't mean either one of us is wrong. I think at the end of the day, the horse is the one that gets to tell us whether it's working or not, and their body language, for anybody that can read it, obviously states whether they're good and comfortable and well or not. So the other thing that you said a minute ago, I actually tend to plan positive punishment.
Okay.
I find that I will generally, we'll say that this is a horse that's in training and has been for a while. So it's not I just walked up to you 30 seconds ago and I'm learning on the fly kind of an animal. But normally, as I'm starting to see a horse have problems with things, to me, those problems sort of mature, and I would really liken it to like a pimple. It's going to mature, and in about 3 days, it's going to come to a head, and then I'm going to pop it, and then we're going to move on with our lives. So I actually kind of do tend to plan when that's going to happen. If I'm doing this in front of a crowd, and I know I am fixing to get a little sharper with this animal, I can always tell them right before it happens, this is what's fixing to happen, and this is why, and this is what I'm seeing. So you are about to watch me apply positive punishment and watch what happens. And when I'm doing it this way, I'm reading the situation. 2 of the big signs I'm going to see right after the positive punishment, the horse's head is going to lower and they're going to lick and chew. They're actually going to relax following it. And I can, in fact, tell you prior to it occurring that it's fixing to occur. I'm waiting for this situation to set itself up. When it does, I'm going to respond this way. I respond this way. Now the horse relaxes. Again, it comes with experience, so you have to recognize the pimple and watch it mature and have the patience to not try to pop it before it's ready. But anyway, that's my take. So go ahead.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I think this is where we're going to differ in approaches. So if I know a problem is going to arise, especially if I know one's going to arise and it doesn't, show up out of the blue, I will strategize how to block it from ever happening and then build the behaviors I want from there. So I'll use an example of, I've been working with a horse and she has a tendency to push into her handler and then become frustrated. And it's this whole thing. It's a very complex behavior case. There's a lot of stuff at play. There's genetics, there's wellness, there's a lot of stuff. This is a very complex case, but I'm going to keep it simple. So I could walk into that pen knowing that this is going to happen and I'm going to correct that behavior. So I'm going to use positive punishment and, tell her to stay out of my space. I could use it very well timed. I could be very strategic about it. I could keep it minimal. I can keep it, it doesn't have to be emotional. I am all on board with, if you're going to use punishment, it needs to be well timed. It needs to be short. It needs to be concise. It needs to be effective, and it needs to be non-emotional. It is what it is. If you're going to use punishment. For me, though, using, working under that umbrella, that framework of like the humane hierarchy or LIMA, my goal with that would be, okay, how can I set this horse up to do the thing I want without having to use that punisher? That's when I'm going to use something that's called protected contact. So I'm going to put a fence barrier between the horse and I, and I'm going to teach this horse how to lead away from me in a way that I can remain safe and I don't have to correct that behavior until she has a really long history of being reinforced for standing X amount of feet away from me or leading, X amount of inches or feet away from me in a safe way. And then I can remove that framework, that protected contact, and the behavior will continue because it has been so well reinforced for so long that she now knows what to do without ever having to experience that punisher.
So if I could jump in right there, that's where I would find the difference. To me, having the time and the ability to do that is a luxury. And frequently it's just not part of the reality that I'm working with. And I have to have a solution now. Yeah. So I certainly wouldn't disagree with what you're talking about. If I had like a super dangerous horse that was brought in here and I've got 6 months to work with it, well, hell yeah, I'll keep a panel between me and him and we'll do. But if I've got 30 minutes to work with it in front of a crowd, then I have to have a very different game plan as to how we're going to approach this.
Yeah. I think this comes down to cultural norms too, and what has been conditioned as to what should be reasonable time frame for certain behaviors to happen and be fixed, and what the crowd is expecting and what horse people are expecting in general. I am working in a slightly different area of the industry where my goal is, one of my big goals is to start working towards changing that time frame expectation. And I would love nothing more than to see the short time frame fix it type expo type displays and all of that changed. And I tell people things are going to take longer than they are, and people have been more than happy to sign up for much longer timeframes. I think it's a matter of changing people's expectations and changing, just educating them. And this is a huge part of it, is the education process. Like, people only know they're being fed a certain thing, and then they come to expect that thing, and then we're perpetuating it. And it's just a cycle that goes round and round and round. And from a trainer's perspective, we have our own horses to feed, we have ourselves to take care of, and so we need to be, we have to have results. And unfortunately, it's just become this cycle where the horse ends up getting the short end of the stick, because the trainers are rushed, the people are rushing the trainers, and then it just goes round and round and round. And I have been able to create my business and to promote a different way of doing things. And I feel very blessed to be able to do that. And I'm hoping in the future, we'll be able to see that as more of a normal, and people will become more educated and start to expect more patience and more time and more, just more goes into this than just 2 days at a clinic or something like that. And so there's definitely a place, and I totally get where you're coming from, and having that limited amount of time. I even feel that pressure sometimes when I'm working with really severe cases, and I know my clients have limited income and just all of this stuff. I mean, like, there has to be results. And this is where the humane hierarchy is just a starting framework. And we have to also look at our humans too, the human learners, because we can also apply the humane hierarchy and LIMA to them too. I don't want my clients to spend the next 6 months or a year in potential danger with this horse. Like, there needs to be their side of the story too. So we have to look at all three, well, actually all four, because we got the horse, the client, and me. We got whatever. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. So there's a lot to it. It's far more complex than just step 1, step 2, step 3.
I just sent a horse home yesterday. It's a rather long story, but the short of it is that I started a filly who wasn't even halter broke when she came in. She's a big, strong racehorse type of filly. I put 45 days on her. That ended 4 months ago. Mm-hmm. So she hasn't had a saddle on her or anything. And then I come to find out very recently that this is to be the personal horse of a 72-year-old man who just recently got bucked off of a Welsh pony for kids and broke 3 ribs. And now he thinks he's about to ride this thing that hasn't had a saddle on it in 4 months. And do I sleep well at night knowing that? No, I do not. That is absolutely an unreasonable expectation and a hell of a position to put me in. And that filly needed 6 months, 8 months of riding. Yes. And needed me to ride her yesterday when he rides her today. Not that this is just a train wreck waiting to happen. And can I get things done with a horse quickly? I can. Does that mean that anybody in the world can get on behind me and do that same thing? Hell no. There's a lot of skill and timing and all of that stuff involved that people don't realize they're witnessing when they're watching this stuff play out. And a peeper back there.
She's going back down. That's something that I say all the time to people, and I promote this a lot. Can I do it? Sure. Should I? No. Like, there's a lot of gray area, and there's a lot of room for interpretation, and there's a lot of variables. I mean, even in that case where you're talking about, sure, can you put 6 months on her and she be a great for most people? Awesome. But maybe, genetics are at play here, and she will, despite the best training in the world, they're just not going to be well suited to each other. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong. That doesn't mean anything wrong with that horse. Just not the right horse for him. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of interested in talking about dominance a little bit more with you. I think this is, again, one of those areas where we're going to be 85% on the same page, but there'll be a little bit of a difference in there. So I'm going to say right off, just to throw this out there, I believe that that dominance and pecking order is always at play. It always will be at play. There's nothing we're ever going to do to negate that and where we can just act like it doesn't exist. I do think that you have to have a relationship with your horse where they recognize you as dominant. I do not think that that means that you must dominate your horse. I don't think those are the same thing at all.
Yeah. So dominance and all of that. Yeah, I think we'll differ on opinion here, but I don't mind that at all. The thing about from my perspective and my understanding is that dominance versus submission or whatever it is an individual relationship. So it's between one horse and another horse. It's not where the problem arises when we look at the whole herd as having this. We'll go and reference the wolf version, which is like the alpha, the omega, like going all the way down. Research is showing that's not true. That's just not accurate. The herd dynamic is always changing. I actually have a prime example of this. And it's not only just always changing, it is multifaceted, and they each have individual relationships with each other. So it's not always linear. I think that's where the problem really rises. So
let me just say right here, I agree 100% with everything that you just said. The wolf research, I do have a couple of problems with, but that's another specific. But everything you just said, we do not differ on at all. I completely.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So, I have an example. I have 3 mares in a herd, and I'll give you their names just for easy reference. So I've got Cashmere, Pumpkin, and June. And Cashmere was kind of, if we're going to go that, we'll just talk about it in a linear way briefly. She was kind of like at the top, and then we had Pumpkin, and then we had June. What happened though is June kind of came up and started messing with Cashmere. She's turning 4 this year. And so we had a whole bunch of hormones come in and just like all of this stuff. And she's just growing into herself. She's also settling into the herd. She's only been here for about 8 months. So it's really becoming, the dynamic is changing. And so she started messing with Cashmere. Well, so now we've got this weird dynamic where I've got June that pushes Cashmere off of resources, and then Cashmere that pushes Pumpkin off of resources, but Pumpkin pushes June off of resources. So it's like this weird, totally messed up thing. And it's a little bit problematic right now, but this just happened a couple of weeks ago when I was watching it. I was like, oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for throwing that in there. And really what it comes down to is access to resources from, again, my understanding and my research and what I observe in my own horses is it's very particular to resource access. So when I talk about Pumpkin moving June, it's because Pumpkin wants the hay and she's going to move June away from it. Or Pumpkin is coming for the water, moves June away from it. June now wants the hay, Cashmere's on it, she moves Cashmere. So in the absence of resources available, there really is no pushing each other around. Like if they were just in a completely neutral environment with no resources, there wouldn't be this moving them around, pushing around, because it's not a constant dynamic. It comes and goes based off of what resources available. Because I also have examples where if the resource is, me, so I can be a resource because I train with positive reinforcement. So I have food and I'm associated with that, whatever. So I'm a resource to the horses. And another good example would be that for a while, I had a different 3 mares, and I'll go back to the original one, not to confuse everybody. If I'm the resource, Cashmere might come and actually push June away, but June will push Cashmere off the hay or off the water. So the individual resource changes also what the horses are doing to interact with each other. So I think dominance is a thing, like it's an individual relationship and how they're interacting with each other, but it's far more complex. And I think this is also a big area of research that should be happening and is starting to happen. And I think there's a lot more we have to learn. I think we're just on the precipice of figuring out so much. I think horses have a fascinating and very complex social structure that we don't fully understand yet. And we have reduced it to this. There's the leader, and then there's the followers, there's the dominant, and then there's the submissive one. And then on top of this, we are crossing species with that. So we're saying that we can be dominant over a horse as a human when we're not even the same species. And we can't be sure that horses actually look at us like that and that we are the dominant one and they're the submissive one. I will say, however, and this is probably I think this comes down to interpretation. Really, honestly, we probably are agreeing on the same thing and we're just using different words for it. I don't often use the term leader because of the connotations that come with it. And it's very adopted by certain ways of training. And so I just use different words. I'll use the word guide, or I can use the word leader, but I have to give it context. I absolutely believe that as a human, and we're living in a human world, and our horses are domesticated by us and live in our world, I have to be their guide. I have to be the one that is leading the situation. I have to be the one that is like, okay, we're going on a walk this way, or we're getting into the trailer this way. The difference though is I don't look at that as an opportunity to put my horse into a submissive state or to force them to comply or to get obedience from them. I look at that as more of it. That's my job. My job is to provide my horse with clarity, with information, with consistency, so they can rely on me, so that they can look at me and say, that human knows what they're doing, I should follow them. And I see this all the time with especially my mare River. We'll be out on a trail and she gets nervous about something and she'll immediately look to me and be like, is this okay? Like, what are we doing? And I'll be like, yeah, it's good, go do it. And then she goes and does it. And so you can be a leader, but I just believe in a different type of leader than has been often attributed with that word, and dominance and submission and all of that, and putting horses into forced obedience and compliance.
So again, I would agree with most of it. I do think we're kind of talking semantics. So
yeah,
to me, like if we're trying to read herd dynamics and herd behavior and the pecking order, I'll boil it down even a little more simply than what you did. You used the phrase pushes her off of the resource or whatever. To me, what it really boils down to is one animal can move the other animal's feet. I can cause you to move your feet. And so through positive reinforcement, I'm going to use the phrase non-traditional or unconventional, but you are still using coercion to move the animal's feet to your will. And thus you're exhibiting dominance, just in a different mechanism than the rest of us might be. So that's why I think you were working with some of these horses that are dangerous and they have some of these dominating behaviors and you can get by with them. You're still approaching dominance, just in a different way that's less head-on brute force. It's sort of through the back door, but you still are working in the same sort of mechanism. So
it's almost like we're looking at it just through like a different lens. Like I just view it through a different lens. And I think where I'll probably just leave it at this, but I think where I struggle with the whole dominance thing is it often leads people to asserting themselves physically using more punishment, basically, is what starts to happen. Because if the horse isn't doing what they're asking, the solution has been, and continues to be in many circles, to assert more physical force and to intimidate the horse into submission. And I disagree with that. That's just what it boils down to, is I would rather.
So let me ask you this, just to be the jerk that I am. How would one horse assert their dominance over another horse? Wouldn't they use exactly that same mechanism of, like, I feel like if I'm really breaking down, and I don't have the list, I did this one time, I really sat down for hours and watched. I only found 3 or 4 facets of body language where they positively reinforce each other through touch and various mechanisms. And I'd come up with 19 or 20 signs of threat or violence that they had. So in my mind, the language of horses is far more full of threats and violence than it is nice things, Disney movie kind of stuff. And half of those interactions are damn and full. So really there's not a lot that they're doing. So if horses refer to other horses naturally within their own environment that way, through I'll even use the dirty word bullying, then I feel like I can ethically use the same mechanism that they use. Now this is a new term to me, this LIMA thing. I always want to do as little as I need to do to have the effect. Again, I don't think you would watch me work horses and be offended or anything like that, or think, wow, this guy's really, I bet he has a truck with way too big of tires. You know what I mean? That sort of, I don't think that's the sort of impression that you would get. But And I'm even going to jump off here. I planned this for the end in case you called Dr. Cook, but so let's talk pain for just a second.
Well, before you go on to that, I have a couple of thoughts about what you said, unless it's all going to tie in.
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. Real quick. So my statements on those two things are, one, I'm not a horse. So horses know I'm not a horse. I'm already working against the situation because I'm a predator compared to them. So there is an
argument to keep things even as familiar as possible then?
No, because we need to work extra hard to counter condition. We already have a negative association for them. They already view us as a problem. And so if we're going to look at it through behavior and stuff, and we want to have that relationship with our horses, we now need to work extra hard to say, I'm not only not a bad guy, I am a really good guy. And so I'm going to counter condition that whole thing. So I'm creating lots of positive associations by continuing to use physical threats or assertion or any type of just aversive stuff. Really, we're working against that relationship we're trying to build because we're continuing to confirm to them that we are dangerous, that we are the bad guy. So that's my thought there on why I don't need to come in and use as much threats and stuff like that as other horses use on each other. And then the second statement I'm going to have on that is that our domestic horses display a lot more antagonistic behaviors than feral herds. And so if you study feral herds and you watch them, at least from what we understand now, I'm always putting that caveat in there, like for what we know now, it may change. There are very few, very rarely displayed antagonistic behaviors towards each other, except for when stallions are fighting for mares. So mare to mare, inside the herd, stallions towards mares, whatever. There's not a whole lot. We tend to see a bunch because it's the stuff that gets captured on video and shared around social media is the stallions fighting and the stallions rounding up the mares. Like we like to see the exciting stuff. If you even just look at social media and human behavior behind it, you know that we all love like the wow factor, right? Mm-hmm. So that type of stuff tends to get perpetuated. And then you look at our domestic herds, though, and their antagonistic behaviors towards each other are far, far above the feral herds because of the limited resources, because of forced herd dynamics, because we're just throwing horses in together, and broken family connections, weaning too early. Like there is so much stress in our horses' lives from domestic life that it increases that aggression towards each other. So those are kind of my two statements on that. And yeah,
I would say that there are more factors at play. So I would agree with you on the aggression in wild horses, with one caveat. A behavior that is typical in wild horses is that if a new stallion comes into and takes over a band of mares, just like lions, they will actually kill the young foals. There was a documentary done, I think the horse, they named him White Cloud or something like that. And they actually filmed him coming in and took over a band. And I think this was a PBS deal or something like that. I could not believe that they released that, but they showed him killing two foals because when the dam is milking, it forced her to cycle where he could breed her. Same exact thing that lions do. That's not something we would typically see in a herd of domesticated horses. And secondly, I would say that a very large part of the reason we see that aggression is because we're juggling horses around, and wild horses are born into a family group. Unless they're the stallions, then it's a mother daughter. And if you've raised, like I've got my alpha mare on this place is a mare named Drusilla. She's half Belgium, she's half thoroughbred. She's 1,600 pounds, and she is first, second, and third position in the hierarchy of horses. There's no one that's even close. So she has foals, and the foals immediately become right behind her in the pecking order. And then even if she's gone, they still maintain that position, even though they didn't necessarily earn it. They just, serotonin levels are high. They've always been there. But you juggle new horses in, and that's when you have the fighting.
Yep.
I would also say that I'm not convinced on the resources aspect of that, because I think a lot of evidence would suggest that the domesticated horses have far more resources than the wild horses do typically. Like I've studied a lot on the wild horses. One of the things, I don't ever participate in the Mustang makeovers, even though that would be right up my alley, and that is actually for moral reasons, and they've tried to recruit me a couple of times to it. If some people really knew some of the truth about Mustangs and how they're raised, there was a man, Mr. Borba, film, they had he owned water rights on this big section of land, and they were trying to get the wild horses to go to water 20 miles away. They would not let him water the horses, and he actually even gathered them up. Now, these were wild. They got in such bad shape for no water. He was able to bring out some panels, bring them into a trailer. He brought them to his ranch, gave them water. They sent the sheriff out there, made him return the horses, and they all wound up dying because they wouldn't allow him to water the horses. They wanted them to go 20 miles to water in a different. So resource management is life and death to those horses, which is also why I feel like pecking order. I kind of feel like some of this research that's going on now is sweeping under the rug a very important principle and pretending like it doesn't exist. And again, the species difference, to me, to every horse out there, innate in its nature, pecking order is life and death. And we tend to pretend like that isn't reality. And I think to pretend like that isn't reality to them is to miss a big chunk of what horses really are and what really does motivate them down in their core.
Maybe one of the big components that we're all missing is the family dynamic. I don't think that we valued enough the fact that they're really families and they bond and they stay connected. And, you know, now we have our domestic life for our horses and they're all thrown in together and things have all changed. And so we're just seeing there's so much we don't know about horse social behavior. And just like with the wolves, like they studied it under a certain lens and certain perspective. And then we started doing some more research. And again, we still have such limited knowledge because it's hard to observe them in just their natural, you know, the way they are. Anyway, there's so much here and it's fascinating. I love this topic. And I think there's just going to be some different lenses to view it through. And then also we just need to all keep in mind that we still don't know a whole lot. Like there's a whole lot we don't know.
As long as we all have the welfare of the horse at mind and we're trying to do our best. I mean, I think that's why I wanted to have this talk with you, because I don't feel like we're antagonistic toward one another. You know, there's mutual respect and it's okay for us to disagree. And it doesn't mean either of us is wrong. I may be a little more right than you are, but you know, that's
I was about to say, have we established a pecking order here? Or do you think, yeah, we're still working on that?
There was one other.
You started bringing up pain or something like that.
Well, let me jump on one thing that you said in the middle of there. So are you saying with all of this stuff that because I use negative reinforcement and unabashedly use positive punishment, that means that my horses can't like me?
No, not at all. I think, like going back to the comment I said earlier about we use a lot more positive reinforcement than we realize, and we condition social connections more so than we realize. The fact that you bring your horses, I'm assuming you bring your horses food every day, creates that positive association. So you are now operating with classical conditioning or respondent conditioning and creating that association. So now your horses are starting to associate you with positive outcomes. I'm just taking that and multiplying it by a lot and being like every interaction, like something happened, like with my clients' horses. It's just so funny. And also sometimes it's hard for my clients, but they start to hear my truck like this is the thing. Like I think most horses do that eventually with their owners, but they will pick up on my truck. And when I'm coming up the driveway, they start calling for me or they'll come running up or whatever within 2 sessions. So it happens fast. They start associating with me, positive outcomes really, really quickly. And so that's my goal here is like, I want that strong, like this lady means awesomeness. And again, that comes a lot from the types of horses I'm working with and what I'm being called in for. That's a big goal of mine. So no, it doesn't mean that your horses don't like you.
All right, Payne, I'm ready to jump in. Are you ready to jump in?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So I talked about using positive punishment. I personally don't have a real big problem if that increases up to a level of pain. One of the problems that I have with people that are very critical, I mean, there are lots of people, as you know, that are going to absolutely roast me for openly saying that I don't mind causing pain to a horse in the course of training. To me, one of the things we have to look at is what is pain. I mean, it's really just a signal, and pain is not the same thing to every horse. So we could say that I take a whip and I use 10 pounds of pressure on a robot arm and I do this. Well, for one horse that might be painful, and for another horse it might just be large pressure and it hasn't reached a threshold or crossed whatever line of pain. I have definitely found throughout my career that there is a massive discrepancy in horses' ability to feel pain and respond to it. There are some horses that you'll start to feel them a little off, and you bring them to the vet and they can't hardly find anything, and you go through that 3 or 4 vet process, and when they finally find what it is, you're like, he's off because of that. And then there's other horses, you bring them in and I think he's off a little bit, and they're like, yeah, he's got a broken leg, he's been trotting around on a broken leg for 4 years, you didn't really know that? It's like, no, he hadn't been off at all, you know. So what is pain is a different answer for every single animal and every single person. The other part of that, I use the example. And look, I'm not saying that I'm a sadist here. I'm not happy to cause pain. You know, I'm just, if I need to escalate to a certain point to get the reaction, I find, again, like with the premeditation I was describing earlier, I'm doing that from a cerebral place, not an emotional place. I don't feel like, I think that's where the line of abuse will get crossed when it becomes, I'm mad and I'm going to show this sucker what's going, you know, that's when we've crossed the line we don't need to cross. But I always find if I will escalate to whatever point I need to, and kind of like the horse chooses the motivation, the horse chooses the pressure. That's really not in my hands at all. And that's why I feel like it's a moral thing. I'm not, you know, I'm just going to go a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7 until the response is there. And then I'm going to back off immediately with good timing. And if I'll do that, then the next time instead of going to a 7, I'm going to go to a 6, and they're going to respond, and they're going to get, that's the process of sensitizing, basically. All I'm talking about is where we shifted on the scale. And to me, if the principle is valid here on the scale, then the principle is also valid here on the scale, and here on the scale, and there on the scale. And the example that I use is that veterinarians, nobody would look at veterinarians as bad, a negative connotation, right? Veterinarians purposefully cause pain to horses all day long. Every time they stick them with a needle, they're drawing blood for this, they're palpating that. All they do is hurt horses all day long. They intentionally, throughout the course of their day, cause pain in order to diagnose various things, and nobody bats an eye at it. But a horse trainer causes pain in order to fix a dangerous problem horse, and all of a sudden we have a problem with it. And again, I'm not saying that abuse can't occur here. There definitely are lines that can be crossed and things that can be done wrong and that could churn your stomach. But I just think society as a whole has gotten a little too far into what I call the Disney version of things, where, you know, it all has to be smooth and it all has to be pretty. And if we ever ruffle a hair or a feather, then, oh my Lord. And again, look, I've sure seen some videos passed around and all that turned my stomach too. But then I've seen some people kind of crucified on the internet, and I'm watching the video and I'm going like, that is not what y'all are describing that to be at all. That wasn't, you know, and unfortunately the judge and jury tend to be people that don't have the experience to really have a strong opinion on the subject. So that's my spiel on pain. Now you can go ahead and whip me with a whip now or whatever.
No. I'm actually going to pause and stop my camera for just a second.
Okay.
You're back. Okay.
I thought you were doing a runner on me. I said, she's gone. She's not there.
I didn't use my safe word.
And let me say here, again, I'm taking no joy. I'm not like hoping I get to cause pain to this horse.
No.
I don't hit a point at which this is going poorly and I'm going to stop. And I know if I do that, this is going to be a bigger problem tomorrow. I'm okay with, you know.
I think this is multifaceted because going back to kind of those frameworks that I work under, my goal is to create as pleasant of an experience as possible for the horse, to create that conditioning, to create that association with me and our interactions, especially when you're dealing with a lot of fear or past negative associations, things like that. It doesn't really help me to add to that. I want them to start to trust me and trust that being with me, interacting with me is going to result in those pleasant outcomes. I use the example of the vets. One thing I want to bring up, and I, of course, love my vets. I don't know how they do their job. I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. My horses don't like vets, and I don't think any horse really does. So we have to keep that in mind. Yes, they do cause pain to find the problem for the horse to help them long term. And that's why they do what they do. That's at least what I hear, is that their intent is to create a long-term result that is good for the horse. They're trying to save the horse. They're trying to take care of the horse. They're not trying, though, to interact with that horse on a daily basis and create that relationship with them. They're just there to do their job and then to allow then for that horse to go home with their owner or caregiver, or whatever, and to continue to have that good relationship and be able to enjoy life together. So we have to keep that in mind, that yes, while they are well-intended and have these, we need them, they're necessary, this is really important, they do cause pain, it often comes at a sacrifice. They don't have those same relationships with the horses that we want to have with our horses. So we need to keep that in mind. I'm not saying that there will never be a situation where you cause your horse pain or discomfort. I help a lot of people where, their horse had a severe injury. They had to do a lot of medical procedures. And then what starts to happen is the horse doesn't want to be caught anymore. The horse doesn't want to have their feet interacted with anymore because they had a bad abscess, on and on and on. So we have to do a bunch of relationship repairing, and we have to recreate positive associations or pleasant associations with having their feet handled, with having just medical care in general. This is where cooperative care comes in play. So, well, I'm not going to say that you're abusive or it's terrible if ever you cause your horse pain, because sometimes it is medically necessary. It is never my goal or intention to cause that if I can avoid it. And this is where it goes back to that framework. I will do everything in my power to create a different setup, to strategize, to have a shaping plan, to set my criteria different, to look at the wellness, like all of this stuff, all these steps that I'll go through first before I even consider intentionally causing pain to get the result that I'm looking for, just because I don't need to. And that kind of could come off wrong, but
it's tricky waters to navigate.
It's tricky waters, and this is going to come from. I just want everybody to keep.
Needs to happen, though. I mean,
yes.
This is there. It has gone way too. It's like a pendulum shift. There was the 1970s and the 80s where you could take a pleasure horse and tie his head to a rafter with his front feet off of the ground, and nobody would dot an I.
Yeah,
but it's shifted too far the other way now. I think where people kind of lose their minds over nothing.
So. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I'm going to put this kind of caveat here. I am not saying that anybody who does anything differently than I do is bad or wrong or a bad trainer or whatever. I have all the respect in the world for horse trainers. I feel like we're all out there just doing our best and just trying to meet everybody's needs. We're dealing with a lot of stress and a lot of people and different variables and different horses coming from different backgrounds. And we have timelines and we usually have restricted income. It is a hard job. We're all out there doing a very hard job. So everybody needs to educate themselves to the best of their ability and just educate themselves as much as they can and then operate on that information to the best of their ability. My interpretation of my education and my experience is that I have a lot of options that I can utilize that are very effective and have been successful in helping horses overcome very dangerous behaviors or just everyday behaviors that make it so that my horses can be safe around people and in life and enjoy their domesticated life and can do everything that other horses can do. My farrier is constantly raving about how my horses are the best horses she's ever worked on. And my vets are all very impressed with my horses. So the end goal is the same. The intention is the same. I am coming from a different direction than maybe you are, or some of the listeners might be, with the same intent. So I feel like there's a lot of steps that I can go through based on my education and my experience and my training that allow me to avoid using positive punishment. And I don't know. That's pretty much the end of my statement there. It's just, I don't see a need to implement it if it's not necessary. And I'm not going to say there's never going to be a day. It might show up. Never say never kind of thing.
Yeah, but that to me is the crux of what it comes down to is the how much time and going out of your way are you willing to trade to avoid this? So how distasteful do you find this so that you're motivated enough to go through all of this trouble to avoid doing this? And I think find this less distasteful. And so I'm not going to go super far out of my way if I know I can just pull out this tool, use it, and move on down the road. And again, I think if the tool is used correctly, then you don't have to use it many, many, many times. I actually find one of the biggest mistakes people make is undercorrecting their horse, which we all call nagging. And so they're doing this little minor thing and they do it 19,000 times with no effect. I would rather you be sharp 3 times and then you're done with the damn thing and you all move on. And now the horse can view you pleasantly again because we're not having to deal with this issue. And are there other ways of dealing with that? Certainly. But if I can deal with it quickly and effectively and now we're done and we move on down the road, then I don't have any issue with it.
Yeah. And I think really the answer to that then is I will do a lot. I will go out of my way a lot to avoid it. But should I use it? And I'm running through examples in my head of where this might show up. And I've used it with my dogs, like counter surfing is a good example with one of my dogs. And I have gone out of my way to avoid putting the dog in that situation where they would be tempted to do that. And then we'd have this whole situation. And like, I've reinforced them for staying on the ground. I make sure to put away the food. So I manage the environment. I do as much as I can. But should the dog jump up on the counter, I have in the past. This has been a very long time. So this was probably like 5 years ago, maybe 6. And so I'd have to go back and reevaluate what I might do today. But I did a quick, like sudden, very alarming, positive punishment, like just went, and it was just very fast, very timely. She never did it again. Like that was it. Like it was, but I did a lot to manage it before to avoid that. And then it just happened one time by accident and it was quick. Yeah. And it was quick and it was unemotional and it was effective. But, too much of that and using it too often and making that the first stop, like that's why it's so far down on the stops, that it's like you should be doing all this other stuff, because if you just left food out and you didn't reinforce them for staying down and you're putting that dog in, or switching over to dogs now apparently, you're putting that dog in a really hard spot. It's like putting candy in front of a kid and just being like, don't touch that. But they're like starving and they haven't had candy in a long, whatever it is. You're just putting them in a really rough, unnecessary spot. Why do that when we have other options available to us and we can set that learner up for success and avoid that, especially, and again, this goes back to this the types of cases I'm working with. That's just one more time that the horse, we'll go back to horses now, we're jumping back and forth. That's just one more time that horse experiences rough handling and scary handling at the hands of a person when they have a long history of people being terrible to them. So I don't feel it's necessary.
Yeah. So I would let me say there's a caveat to this, or a couple. One, I mean, I'm careful about the kind of horse that I would do this with. There are certain horses that I would never get rough with. There are certain horses that need you to get a little rough, I think. And I'm also, just as I can get rough, I can get nice. And so there's a very black and white. You pick the me you want to live with in your life. Do you want to live with the black me that's rough over here or the me that's really kind? Well, if you just act this way, then you get this me and not this me. And so again, that sets up choice, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we're allowing them to choose their boundaries. To me, it's the hot wire fence. And if that hot wire fence is hot, they're not going to touch it more than twice and they're done. They will leave that fence alone for the rest of their life.
Well, we could look at that hot wire fence, and I'm not opposed to hot wire fences. I have lots of clients that have hot wire fences. I don't use them personally just because of various reasons. It has nothing to do with ethics or anything. But if you had a horse, though, and this is going to go into another point I have on this topic. If you have a horse, though, that is in this pen and it's surrounded by the hot wire and they don't have any hay or good water and they don't have any companions, they're going to be testing that fence a whole lot more because they're trying to get to the grass on the other side. They're trying to get to their companion, right? Sure. So I think punishment often it can be a crutch, can be a go-to for a couple of reasons. One of the primary ones is it's very reinforcing for the user. So when we use positive punishment, we actually get positively reinforced because the behavior that we wanted to stop just stopped. And we're like, yes, it worked. And so we get reinforced for that. So it's tempting for us to continue to use it because of how reinforcing it is for us, how quick it is. It's much harder to go a longer route. And yeah, because it works. And so we have to look at it from both sides of the equation. Like, how are we being reinforced for this? Is that encouraging us to use it more, even though maybe we shouldn't, like all that. The other side of it is because it's so quick and can be effective when used properly, it often discourages us or stops from, we're just not as likely to look at the cause for the behavior because we tend to go, okay, this horse is testing this hot wire fence. We need to make the hot wire fence hotter, right? Or we need to put more layers, or we need to, whatever it is, we're going to make the punishment stronger. We're going to use it more. We're not stopping and going, maybe they need more hay. Maybe they want the companion. Maybe, all of this other stuff. Same thing in our training. Why is your horse biting you? Why are they rearing? Why are they kicking out? I want people to stop first and be like, why are they doing this before we go to punishment? So that's where,
sure.
There's just so many stops. There's so many levels there.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just as I would be leery of a very novice horse person beginning to feed treats and stuff. The reason I'm leery of it is because I don't feel like they have the timing, the experience reading the horse and so forth. And so I think they're more likely to get themselves into trouble. Whereas if they went to someone like you, then they would have good guidance and could probably do it in a way where, of course, they're still going to make mistakes, and their 10th one is going to be way better than their first one was, right? And so forth. I kind of feel like that's the same sort of thing where you're talking about poorly used punishment and a person who is just oblivious to a whole lot of things going on. Well, I don't feel like that's me. I don't. A lot of the things you've talked about, like I tend to keep horses in paddocks or large pastures. I've got one that's about 4 acres where I'll keep some colts that I'm starting in. And we've got some 1/4 acre paddocks. I rarely keep a horse in a stall. I actually view a stall as something you have to break a horse to. So like my demo horses that are coming up, they have to spend some time in the stalls here because it's just the nature of when we're on the road. They're going to have to spend some time in the stalls. So, but the typical deal of a horse lives in a stall for 23 hours a day, and then I pull him out and go ride him for a little while. Yeah, I totally agree. You're going to have some problems. That's not a great way of dealing with it if you have other options and so forth. So,
well, one layer deeper on that, though, is not always just about the environment, but it's also what the horse is feeling emotionally. A lot of times when we see these behaviors like biting or kicking or rearing or all these dangerous behaviors that we want to punish, a lot of times it's coming from a place of self-defense and fear. And we tend to associate it more with like them being disrespectful or dominant or whatever. But, punishing that fear doesn't make the fear go away, and it will actually in the long term make it a whole lot worse. So this is, again, there's so much risk with it being used poorly, which, I mean, there's risk with using positive reinforcement poorly too. There's risk with all horse training used poorly.
I would completely agree with you. I mean, there are definitely some horses that you do not need to get rough with, and it all comes down to why they're acting this way. And I think there are other horses like for me, one of the worst calls that I get is the people that are new to horses. They had this mare, they bred this baby, they raised it in the backyard like a dog. It has no manners whatsoever. Like, that's the one I'm going to have to get rough with because the herd didn't teach it the boundaries and the structure of the hierarchy, and that's going to fall on me. And so that's the horse that's going to have the rough 30 days. The feral horse that's scared to death of people and he's bouncing off the walls of the trailer when you bring him, that's a horse I'm not going to have to be rough with at all. Quite the opposite. We're going to have to be nurturing and caring and getting it to like people. But I find time and time again, this is why I think the leadership stuff is very relevant. The 30-day colt that the family raised in the backyard like a dog and spoiled to death, when they come to see that horse at the end of the month and we all get in the round pen together, keep in mind, I've been rough with him for the last month, kind of thumping on him the whole time. And that horse will follow me around like a dog, and it has absolutely no concern for these people that raised it and did all these things for it for the last 2 years. And to me, that is evidence of that they value the leadership position and they have respect, and that trumps the more superficial. I think people are that way too. I mean, there are definitely certain groups of people that gravitate towards people that treat them poorly. And there are certain people that you could liken this to dating, the nice guy that all the girls keep leaving, but they want the bad boy, right? So I think that kind of stuff, like you say, is pretty complex. I don't think it's all that straightforward. My whole deal is that I view my horsemanship journey as trying to gather as much knowledge and as many tools as I possibly can and put them all in my toolbox so that when I come across this situation, hopefully I have and understand the correct tool for it, and I can take that tool out of my toolbox, use it where it's applicable. I think both of us would agree that all of the problems that we run into are people that are short on tools or that use the wrong one at the wrong time.
So. Yeah, or with strong emotions or in an impatient way.
So that's another. I try to preach. I actually have a mailbox at my arena, and it is for you when you enter the arena. It's for you to put your ego and your fear and all of your emotions. You put them in the mailbox, and then you can go on in there and work your horse. And if you feel like you need them back when you leave, then you can open the mailbox and take them back out. But I think you need to be pretty dispassionate about things when you are working a horse. And if we're being honest, all of the research that we are both interested in and reading, if that research is not being done by a dispassionate clinical person in a white lab coat, then is it valid research because it was done by a biased source that was emotionally tied in and was looking for a certain outcome and thus, push something a certain way or whatever? I think that removal of emotion is pretty darn necessary for training and all. So
I think I really like your idea of checking the ego at the gate. I tend to feel a little bit different about other emotions. I think they have a place, but that's a whole nother topic. But I do agree that we need to be very self-aware and very present when we're training and acknowledging how we feel about things. And sometimes, there's been situations where I'm in working with a client and working with their horse, and I recommend them go to a therapist and talk about, because they're bringing a lot of that into the horse training, or the horses can sense it, or, some of the problems they're having is not so much about the horse. It's about, it's about their history and with relationships usually, or something else entirely. And they need to talk about it. And that's not my area of expertise. I talked to them a little bit, but I'm like, you really need an expert on this, not me, but I'll do my best for now. But there's so much that goes into it that we bring into the equation. And we often really, if I was to really sum up a lot of what I do, is a lot of this is not so much about the horse as it is about us. And just, needing to learn more and to learn how to apply what we're learning and all that. But we tend to project a lot onto our horses and blame them for a lot that it's actually at our hands. It's our fault. So,
sure. Absolutely. Well, I know we have gone twice as long as what we were talking about here. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on or give me a good dressing down while I sit here cowered in the corner or anything like that?
No, I, as much as, we don't do things the same way, I really appreciate having, or not everything the same way. I appreciate having this conversation. I think a lot more of these conversations are needed. I think there needs to be a lot less, just taking sides and polarization. And, just because I do something one way doesn't mean I'm anti the other way. It's just that I've learned that this is what works for me and my clients, and this is what I do, and this is what I teach. And if you want to learn something else, then here's my recommendation for who to go to. I have trainers that I refer people to all the time because they're not exactly lining up with what I want to do, or they have different goals or whatever. Like examples, I'm not a riding instructor. So if you want to go show and do that, then you need to go to a riding instructor. So I think that there's space for us all. And I think that if we can continue to really focus on supporting our horses and putting their needs up there and in priority and taking care of them and supporting them how they need, then they're very capable of reciprocating like what we want from them. It's usually all our problems arise from not considering the horse enough as an individual and their species. And so anyway, I appreciate everybody who's listening to this episode, and I appreciate having this conversation. I am more than happy to chat with anybody about any questions they have, do more of these kinds of conversations, no matter where you're coming from, what background. If anybody's interested in learning more about how to implement positive reinforcement, even if it's just on the side. I have many students that do it kind of on the side, doing different things, or they're just working on one very specific behavior. Maybe they have a horse that's afraid of having their hoof soaked now because of an abscess or something like that. You can use it just for that. Like, so there's so much room to explore with it on a small scale and then expand if you want. You can always reach out to me through my website. So yeah.
Absolutely. And again, we'll have links to all of that stuff in the show notes. So
perfect.
Adele, thank you very much for coming on. I've enjoyed the conversation. Maybe I'll open the door. Maybe in 6 or 8 months we can do this again or something, because there's a whole lot more we could talk about.
There's a lot.
For a long time here, so.
Yeah, there was so much that you even brought up, and I was like, oh, we could dive into that. I'm like, no, let's keep going. Yep. So there's so much.
All right.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, stay on just a second if you don't mind. And everybody, thank you all much. We'll talk to you next time. We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.